If you'll open your Bibles to Luke chapter 16. Luke chapter 16. Now we're starting a sermon series called Money. And it's a pretty simple title, isn't it? Money. Something that we all deal with. Who here deals with money every day? I wish. Who here is the cause for money being spent almost every day? Can I get some kids to raise their hand on that? Amen. Who here has ever worried about money? Have you ever worried about money? Has money ever been an issue with you? Have you ever wondered where your next payment's going to come from? Whether it's a car payment, house payment, rent payment, you name it. You know, have a surprise, as a parent, you have a surprise medical bill. One of your kids goes to the hospital and all of a sudden you're looking at a big medical bill. We all have money in our lives. In fact, it's something that Jesus talks about more than anything else that he talks about. He talks about our relationship with money and our relationship with God in relation to that money. And for us to understand what it is to be a good steward of the money, we have to understand how to interact with it. We have to learn how to learn it, how to use it, how to tithe it, and all those things. In fact, today's sermon title is Money, Learn It. Money, Learn It. And that's what we're going to look at a little bit today. Now, I would recommend, I don't know if you've heard of Dave Ramsey, but Dave Ramsey has some wonderful books on how to manage money. If you are in a position where you need to get a better grasp on your money, we don't have enough time in today's sermon period to go over all of the lessons that you would find in Dave Ramsey's books. But Dave Ramsey, Larry Burkett, there are a couple people who have great teaching, but Dave's is really, really good, and I would recommend that you pick that up. It is some of his books are really, really good. So we need to learn how to learn our money, learn what our money's for. Now, what a steward is, let me talk to you about what a steward is first. Stewardship is one of those big $25 words that Christians throw around. And if you're not a Christian, if you're just visiting with us, you might not know what it means. In fact, you might be a Christian and be here in the church and have spent your whole life in the church, and you really don't know what it is to be a steward. And that's okay. We're going to talk about that. We're going to work on remedying that over the next few weeks as we look at money. Now, Brian and Sean both work in banks, so they're a little more familiar. And Martha Richardson worked in one for years, and they're a little more familiar with what it is to be a steward. And as a steward, what you are is you're a person who's taking care of someone else's money. Now, let me say that again. As a steward, you are in charge of someone else's money. And what a master of a house would do is he would bring in a person who was good with money, and he would teach a person how to work with money. And he would put that person in charge of a certain amount of money. You'd usually have one person who was over it all, and then you would have other people who were over parts of it. You might have a person who was over, if you had a really wealthy lord, you might have a person who was over all of the gardens. You might have a person who was over all of the household. You would have a person who was over this and over that, and each one of them would have a budget that they were given to work with. And it was money that they were supposed to manage. Now, the interesting thing was that money was not their money. That money was someone else's money. It's the master's money. Now, they were expected to take a living wage from it. They were expected to take a portion of that and live on it. And that was part of their pay. It was something that they could live on, take care of their families, that they could enjoy, that they could tithe from, and all those things. But ultimately, the money belonged to the master, and the money was supposed to be used. And Jesus talks about that quite a bit. Now, it's interesting for us to say that if money is not ours, if the money that we make is not ours, if the money that we make belongs to God, if He is truly the master of our lives and the money that we make is His, then we should have a totally different focus on what money is for us. Suddenly, money does not become something for us to seek and grab and to love. It becomes something that we should be using to make our master's glory greater. Right? And that's an idea that's hard for us, especially in 21st century United States, to understand. Because we have a very materialistic world. We live in a very materialistic world. In fact, all you have to do is cut on TV. I don't know if y'all have noticed or not, but commercial breaks have gotten longer and TV shows have gotten shorter. Used to be, when I was a teenager, you could pause a VCR. Yeah, I said it, VCR, for people who, are DVD and Blu-ray and all that stuff, yeah, VCR. You could pause, if you were recording a TV show, a VCR, and then unpause it, and your show would go on. Got to be a point in about the last 10 years where you could pause it, and my VCR would time out and stop recording before the show came back on. The pause actually went longer, the commercials went longer than the pause thing that was programmed into the VCR. Isn't that crazy? Our world is focused on money. It's focused on more, me. Got to get this, got to get that, got to have the next big thing. People camp out to get the next iPhone when it comes out. Did you know that? People sleep outside to get an iPhone. Where if they wait a couple days, they can go in and grab one. We're so focused on getting, me. And that's not what we're supposed to be if we're a steward, if we understand who we really are called to be. Now, let me tell you this. Stewards were given great responsibility, and they were given a lot to work with. Some people may have been given more than other people. God gives us according to our ability. Now, sometimes God grows our ability and stretches our ability, but He gives us according to our ability, and we're supposed to take what He gives us and multiply that. So there's nothing wrong with having wealth. There's nothing wrong with accumulating wealth and things like that. It's how we use that wealth that determines whether we're doing something right or wrong. And it's how we think about that wealth that determines whether we're doing something right or wrong. Jesus tells us that we cannot serve two masters. We either serve money or we serve God, but we can't serve both. If we're serving God, then money is something to be used. It's something to be brought in and sent back out. It's something to make work. If we serve money, then we're doing everything we can do to get and make and hold more. And we can't have it both ways. We can't have it both ways. Now, we're going to look at a story here. This is a story that Jesus is telling. We're told in chapter 15 of Luke that Jesus has come together in a gathering, and there's a bunch of tax collectors and other people there. It says, now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering together to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were upset. They were muttering, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." And Jesus is going to tell a series of stories about money. And He's going to talk about a man who leaves 100 sheep to find one. He's going to talk about a woman who loses a coin and she goes searching for that coin. He's going to talk about a man who has two sons, and one son asks for his inheritance and leaves, and the other son stays home. And the one son who took the inheritance blows the money. He's got the wrong focus on his money. He blows the money, and he ends up eating pig swill. And goes, there's got to be a better life than this. I can go back to my dad. At least I could work for him as one of his servants. And he comes back home, and the way his father welcomes him. And as He's teaching these stories, Jesus comes to this story. And this is the one I want to look at today. This is the one I want to focus at today, because this one is actually going to talk about learning your money. It's going to talk about making money. It's going to talk about making money work. It's also going to talk about giving. So Jesus goes on and He tells His disciples. Now remember, He's talking to whom? Who is one of the big numbers, big people in this group? Sinners and tax collectors. Now, here's the thing about tax collectors. Tax collectors in that day, who here likes tax collectors? What? Come on, Catherine. Tell me you like tax collectors. No? Oh, man. Nobody likes them? Well, they really didn't like them back then, because not only did they collect your taxes, they took more than what you were supposed to pay in your taxes. And they often padded their own pockets on top of what they would be taking for taxes. So there was a reason why the Pharisees didn't like the tax collectors, because they were getting rich off of other people. And Jesus reached out specifically to these people. So when Jesus is talking to them, he's talking money. It's a subject that they would have understood. It's a subject, in fact, that he talks about, and he changes their lives. Matthew was a tax collector. So was who? He was up in a tree. Does anybody remember? Zacchaeus. Yeah, Zacchaeus is so affected by what Jesus teaches that he runs home and he invites Jesus to his house, and he says, I will repay and I will give up to heaven. I mean, he gets excited about what Jesus is teaching. So Jesus is telling this story to these group of people who manage money, people who understand what it is to be money managers. And he says, now there was a rich man who had a manager, a steward, who was accused of wasting his possessions. Now, has anybody ever heard of somebody who does that? In today's world, we call that what? Embezzlement. Right? That's where you take what you're supposed to be managing for someone else and you use it for yourself. And we can often justify. Now, all of us have been in a situation where we have done that. Whether it's with money or with something else, we've all been in a position where we have taken, whether it's somebody's trust, whether it's somebody's love, whether it's somebody's money or something like that, and justified to ourselves why it would be right to do the wrong thing. Oftentimes with embezzlement, what happens is a person has gotten so far behind in their debts, or they're in serious problems with medical bills. Medical bills is one of the number one things that starts embezzlement. And what a person will do is say, I'll take just a little bit of money here out of petty cash or out of whatever, and I'll use it, and I promise I'll pay it back on my next paycheck. The only problem is that doesn't happen. That happens with credit cards. Who here has a credit card? Who here has gotten in, I won't ask you to raise your hand on this, who here has gotten into serious credit card debt? Because what happens is you're borrowing money from the credit card company saying, I have every intention of paying this back, and sometimes you end up in a position where you're living on your credit card, and the problem is you never get to the point where you pay it back. That's bad stewardship. Now, there's ways out of that, and there's better ways to manage your money, but that all comes with training, and that's something we're going to be looking at in this upcoming year. We're actually going to have financial classes where we're going to go through some of the things like Dave Ramsey's financial planning series and things like that to teach people, so people really want to understand how to manage money and manage money well. We don't want to just preach about it. We want to make it a part of your life so that you really learn how to live it, and we're going to be looking at that. So this man was a money manager, and he was accused of wasting his master's possessions. So the master calls him in, and he goes, you know what I've heard about you? I hear that you're wasting my possessions. I want you to give me an account of your management because I'm firing you. It's time for an audit. Oh boy, an audit. Everybody loves an audit, don't they? Brian, tell me, man. People, whoo-hoo, audit. Yeah. You know, people party when the IRS calls them and goes, we're going to audit you, you know. There's a Ray Stevens song about that. I'll give you a challenge to find that Ray Stevens song about an audit. It's not right. Anyways, he goes on, he says, so he calls him in, and he says, I want you to give me an account of the management because I'm going to fire you. What I hear is that you're wasting my money. I want to see your accounts. Otherwise, you're out of here. So the manager panics. The manager gets scared. I would, if I was in his position and I learned that I was getting ready to lose my job, my livelihood, and all of that, I would be scared, especially having a family, because then what am I going to do to support my family? What am I going to do to make ends meet? And the manager says to him, what am I going to do? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, so what do we know about this guy? He's a little scrawny dude. He's never done heavy physical labor. He's not strong enough to do that during a day. At least he's honest with himself. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm too prideful to beg. I'm not willing to beg. I'm too proud to beg, but I'm not strong enough to do daily labor. So what am I going to do? And now he's faced with a situation. This man knows money. This man has learned money. He's learned about money. He knows how to make money work. He's just been taking more off the top than he was supposed to. He's been wasting the money. Now, I don't know if anyone here has ever wasted money. Has anybody here ever wasted time? Yeah? We can find ways to waste time, can't we? In fact, in our classroom today, we said that time is money. Yeah, our Sunday school class, we were talking about this, and we said time is money. We know how to waste things, and I've wasted money before. I mean, who here has ever gone out and bought a scratcher? Oh, come on, be honest. I've done that before. Every now and then I would go out and just spend $1 and get one and have $1's worth of fun and throw the scratcher away. Has anybody ever watched the movie Home? And they're flying along in the car, and it's got the little dispenser, and he's like, oh. Well, I was actually in a convenience store one day, and a lady came in, and she bought $300 worth of scratchers. $300 worth of scratchers. And she stood there and scratched and scratched and scratched and scratched until she got all the winning tickets out of it. The winning tickets added up to about $120. And the lady told me that this lady did that every time that she got a Social Security check. She came in and bought $300 worth of scratchers, hoping to hit the big money. Now, here's the thing. This lady was seriously strapped for cash. She struggled in getting, I know that she went to a food pantry, which is okay. I mean, there's times where we have to do that. She went to a food pantry for groceries and things like that. Think of what she could have done with an extra $300 each month. We've all been there. We have things in our lives that we enjoy but aren't really necessities. Things that we spend money on that we may not need to spend money on. Places where we could free money up to use that money in another place. And that's all part of good stewardship, is thinking about that. Am I using my money wisely? Am I putting my money where it should be put? Am I placing my money where it should be placed? Am I using it in a way that is wisest to use it? So the manager sits there and he starts thinking about this. This is what he's thinking about. How am I going to save my job? I know what I'll do. This is what I'm going to do. Since I'm losing my job here, I need to find a way to get some people to welcome me into their homes. I'm going to start mooching. I know what I'm going to do, man. I'm going to go camp out with my buddies. And I've got to find a way to build up some good relationships here. So this is what he's going to do. He goes out and he calls in each one of his master's debtors. And these are people that he dealt with on a daily basis. These would have been people that he was collecting bills from. So he calls old Stephen in and he goes, Stephen, tell me, man, how much do you owe my master? And Stephen goes, well, dude, I'll tell you, I owe 900 gallons of olive oil. 900 gallons of olive oil, and I promise you, I'll get that paid. Dude, listen to this. Here's what I want you to do. I want to take your bill, and I want you to sit down, and I want you to make it out for $450. I want you to do half of it. If you'll pay half of it right now, I will forgive the debt. You won't owe any more. Stephen goes, right on, man. Because, 900, he was looking at 900 gallons of olive oil. That was a lot of money that he owed. And now he's getting it cut in half. I can do that. I can manage that. So he makes a payment. Now, here's the deal. The manager didn't have, the rich man did not have 900 gallons of olive oil, but now he has 450. Then he calls in Sean, and he goes, Sean, dude, tell me how much you owe. And he says, I owe 1,000 bushels of wheat. That's 30 tons of wheat. I owe 30 tons of wheat. Dude, I'll tell you what, cut that in half. You owe 1,000, let's take it down to 800. We won't do it in half, we'll do 800. Let's do 800. Can you manage that? Sean goes, you know what, I got that, I can manage that. All right, let's do that. You give me 800 and we'll cancel the debt. Here. So the master is paying attention to this. Master is aware of what's going on in his house. The master is aware of what all of his servants are doing. And he's aware of this man. This man was a good money manager. Let me say this again. This man knew how to make money work. The problem was he liked to make money work for himself rather than for his master. And even here, he's trying to make the money work for him rather than his master, because he's trying to build up goodwill with people where he can go and stay with people. But who is benefiting here? The master's benefiting. For once in his life, this manager is doing the right thing for the money. It might be the wrong reason, but he's doing the right thing. So the master does something interesting. Verse 8, the master commends the dishonest manager because he acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of light. Boy, there is not a more true statement, I think, than you find in this one. People of the world are shrewd because they deal with people of the world. People of the light tend to be more honest. We tend to be more naive because we're people of the light, and we're not, we start thinking righteously. We're thinking the right way. But this man actually did something here from which we can learn. He sat down and thought out, how can I make the master's money work? And he found a way to do it. He says, I tell you, this is Jesus speaking, I tell you, verse 9, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into your eternal dwelling. Now that sounds weird for Jesus to say, doesn't it? But I want you to think about this. He isn't telling you to hoard wealth. He's telling you to use wealth and use it in a way to build up good relationships. Now, if this man had gone to Stephen and said, how much do you owe? And Stephen says, I owe 900 gallons of oil. And he goes, you give me that 900 gallons of oil right now. That would not have built up a good relationship. Stephen may have had to pay it, but it wouldn't have built up a good relationship between the two of them. Instead, this man forgives half the debt, thereby gaining part of that debt back for his master and building a good relationship with the person whose debt he forgave. Same thing with Sean, and forgiving a portion of his debt. Now, it's interesting, he cuts his by half and his by 20%. He could afford more than he could. It's just something that we see there in the scripture. But the man was doing something different. Instead of holding people's feet to the fire, he was doing something to build relationship. And Jesus says it is better to use worldly wealth to build up good relationships than it is to hoard it. And as Christians, we have to understand that God gives us His money to use in a way that benefits the people in the world around us, in a way that brings glory. That's part of the reason why we do these offerings like Lottie Moon and Annie Armstrong and what's the other one that we do each year? What is it? Yeah. That's why we do these things. Because taking this money and going to another place and building a well for a person a person who might be a Muslim, who might be a Hindu, a person who might be an atheist, someone who doesn't know God, we are building a relationship with them. And from that relationship, we gain the foothold to start building a relationship with Christ in their life. When God's money is used wisely to reach into the world, when God's money is used wisely, it opens the door for the gospel. The master would be better able to speak to Stephen after having a portion of his debt canceled than if his debt was fully. Why did Jesus come to the earth? Why did Jesus die on the cross? Because we are all debtors. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. We are debtors. We owe a debt in sin that Jesus came and canceled out. Was his death. He poured out his blood. He poured out his life. He gave his flesh on the cross so that we might have a restored relationship with the Master, so that our debt would be canceled and we could come to him. So shouldn't we do the same thing with the money that God gives us to use in our lives? Shouldn't we learn how to make that money really work? Shouldn't we look at each area of our life and see if we're using the money that God provides for us wisely? Wisely to meet our own needs as well as to meet the needs of others. And that's why Jesus commends him. He says this man is actually building up a relationship. He goes on and he says, if you have not been trustworthy, let's back up. He says here in verse 10, who can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. What movie came out this past Christmas season? Star Wars. Star Wars. I remember when the first Star Wars movie came out. Does anybody here remember when the first Star Wars movie came out? All right. And I got, it was before you were born, I got an X-Wing fighter. And it was a Christmas toy, man. I loved it. I see somebody nodding over here. You had one too? You press down R2-D2 and the wings would pop open. Man, it was an awesome toy. And one of my friends asked me if he could borrow it. When he brought it back, it was broken. I want you to know that friend lives here in Bluefield, Virginia. I know because I ran into him the first week I was down here. And you know what? I remember him breaking my X-Wing fighter. And guess what I never did? I never loaned him another toy. Why? Huh? No, he just broke it. I was upset, It wasn't awkward. I mean, we're still good. We were still friends. I mean, we stayed good friends. I just didn't loan him any more toys because he broke my toy. I knew that I couldn't trust him with another one. Well, for those who are dishonest in little things, we can pretty much guarantee that they're going to be dishonest in big things. But for those who are able to be trusted with little things, they can receive much. And God does that. God rewards the people who are good stewards for him. He either rewards them here or he rewards them in the life to come, but the reward is there. And God says to us, if you're faithful in the small, I will give you much. He says, so if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches? I want you to think about this. Our life right here, I saw this in an illustration from Francis Chan this week, not Jackie Chan. Consider this here to be life, all right? This is our worldly life. This is our earthly life. And so many of us are focused on what we're going to do right here. I've got to save up money so that when I retire, I can spend this time traveling. I've got to save up money so that I can do this or I can do this. And oh my goodness, what's going to happen right here when we have all of this ahead of us? Eternal life. What we're doing now is we've got the training wheels on. We've got the training wheels on. What we're learning right now, what we're learning with money, what we're learning with prayer, what we're learning with faith, what we're learning with sharing our faith, relationship building, all the things that we learn in church is preparation for this. It's preparation for this. That's why we need to learn how to use our money. That's why it's so important that we prove ourselves to be trustworthy in the little, so that when we reach eternity, we're trustworthy for the lot. He says, if you're not trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? Think about this. What we have right now belongs to God. Everything we have. The clothes that I'm wearing, the microphone that I have on, the car that I drive, the house that I live in, the money in the bank that just went out to bills, the money that we have, all of that belongs to God. But God wants to give us an inheritance, something that we will own. So we should prove trustworthy in handling what is His, so when the time that comes for the inheritance, for us to receive what is ours, we can be trusted with it. And he goes on and says, you can't serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You can't serve God and money. Now the Pharisees who loved money heard all this, and they were upset. It says they sneered. And he said to them, you are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of others, but God knows your heart. What people value highly is detestable in God's sight. God doesn't care about the things of this earth. He doesn't want us to chase after the things of this earth. He wants us to chase after Him. And He is our inheritance. So we're told that He is our inheritance, that we receive His kingdom. Shouldn't we be looking for that? So as we focus in the next week, as we go over the next few weeks and start looking at our money, let's learn how to use it. As you go out this week, go home and sit down and look at your budget if you have one. If you don't have one, start working on a budget. Figure out where your money is going. And figure out if you're using your money wisely. Figure out if there's ways that you can free your money up to use it to reach into this world, to reach the people who are lost, or to care for those who are in need. Let's be trustworthy with our Master's money, so that when the time of reward comes, He will give us what is great. There's nothing wrong to look forward to the reward that we receive in heaven. God offers it to us as an incentive, as something to motivate us.